The conference room was too quiet for a place designed for negotiations. Usually, Adrian Hale dominated this space, closing multi-million-dollar deals, flipping impossible odds, bending global markets with a signature. But today, he couldn't move his hand. The divorce papers lay between him and Elena like a final verdict. Thick white sheets that felt heavier than iron shackles. His pen rested near the signature line, yet his fingers refused to tighten around it. Elena sat across from him, spine straight, hands folded neatly on her lap. She wasn't dressed in the soft colors she used to favor. Today it was a simple gray blouse, sleeves pulled to her wrists, hair tied back without effort. She looked tired, not physically, but in a way that reached her soul. He had prepared himself for anger. For accusations about missed anniversaries, unanswered messages, canceled trips. For a flood of all the things he had neglected while building an empire big enough to protect them both. But she said none of it. "If this is what you want, sign it," she whispered. Her voice didn't shake, but her eyes told him everything she refused to say. That she had cried, that she had waited, that she had finally stopped hoping. His chest tightened painfully. He swallowed hard, forcing down the emotion rising in him. He had asked for the divorce after months of silence and distance, convinced she no longer needed him, convinced they had turned into strangers who shared a house but not a life. He picked up the pen. The metallic click echoed like a gunshot. "Elena," he began, unsure what he even wanted to say. Maybe an apology, maybe a question, maybe a plea. But she only watched him with acceptance, with an unbearable calm that made him feel like the villain in a story he never meant to write. He signed. The ink spread across the page, final and cold. He pushed the papers toward her, expecting she would sign quickly and leave. Instead, her fingers trembled as they touched the edge. She didn't sign. She looked up, really looked at him for the first time in months, and the pain behind her eyes made every breath in his lungs freeze. "Before we end this," she said softly, "there's something you should know." The silence after her words felt like a pressure drop, as if the room itself inhaled sharply and waited. Adrian stiffened, the hairs on the back of his neck rising. "What is it?" he asked, softer than he meant to, afraid the answer would break him more than the divorce papers had. Elena's gaze lowered to her hands. She twisted her fingers together, a familiar nervous habit he hadn't seen in a long time. It hit him then. He hadn't been paying enough attention to notice it fading. "I wasn't planning to say anything," she murmured, her voice fragile but controlled. "I thought signing these would make everything easier. For you, for me." A cold dread crawled up Adrian's spine. His mind began flipping through scenarios like pages in a file. Betrayal, secrets, a hidden life. He had prepared himself for many endings, but none of them felt like this moment. "Just tell me," he urged, stepping around the table. His chest tightened with a fear he couldn't name. Elena inhaled shakily. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving you." The words hit him like a physical blow, robbing him of air. She continued before he could speak, eyes glistening. "I left because I got sick. Really sick." The air in the room dropped several degrees. She lifted her sleeves slightly, revealing faint marks on her wrist from IV lines, lines he had never seen, because she had never let him get close enough. "I've been in treatment for months," she confessed. "Chemotherapy, tests, more tests. Some days I couldn't even stand without help." Adrian felt the floor tilt beneath him. "And I didn't tell you," she said, voice breaking, "because you were overwhelmed already. The company was falling apart. You barely slept. I didn't want to become another weight around your neck." He stared at her, heart pounding with disbelief and guilt. How had he not known? How had the woman he loved been fighting for her life alone while he sat in boardrooms thinking she had simply fallen out of love with him? "Elena," he whispered, voice raw. She looked up, tears slipping down her cheeks as she delivered the sentence that shattered him completely. "I thought leaving you would hurt less than watching you carry my pain too." Adrian shot to his feet so quickly the chair slammed backward into the wall. The sound echoed through the room, sharp and jarring, but neither of them looked at it. His eyes were locked on her, wide, stunned, wounded. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice cracked, harsher than he intended, but underneath it was something raw and terrified. Elena flinched but didn't look away. She drew in a trembling breath, wiping under her eyes with the back of her hand. Because you were drowning in pressure, Adrian. Every day you came home exhausted. Every night you fell asleep with your phone in your hand. I didn't want to add my fight to everything you were already carrying. He stepped closer, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. I'm your husband, he said, almost pleading. I vowed to carry your pain. That's not a burden, it's my place. She shook her head softly, the movement full of sadness, not defiance. You say that now, but then, we barely spoke. I didn't want to watch the pity in your eyes. I didn't want to be the reason you lost focus when the board was threatening to remove you. I didn't want to become another crisis you needed to manage. That's not what you are, he snapped, his voice breaking on the last word. You're not a crisis. You're... His throat closed. He swallowed hard. You're the reason I built all of this. Her lips parted, but she said nothing. He moved until he was standing right in front of her, slowly reaching for her hand, terrified she might pull away. But she didn't. Her fingers curled weakly into his palm, and for a moment the world felt familiar again. She looked up at him, eyes shimmering. You didn't notice I was disappearing, Adrian. Not because you stopped caring, but because you were everywhere but with me. The truth lanced straight through him. Not an accusation, just a painful fact. He lifted her chin gently, forcing her to see the regret etched into his face. I should have seen you, he whispered. I should have known something was wrong. A single tear slipped down her cheek, and he caught it with his thumb. Maybe, she murmured, but I didn't give you the chance. They stood in the quiet, holding each other's truth, and the weight of everything they almost lost. Adrian didn't think, he simply moved. With one sharp motion, he grabbed the divorce papers from the table. Elena gasped just as he ripped them straight down the middle. The sound of tearing paper sliced through the room like thunder. Pieces drifted to the floor, scattering around their feet like broken promises. Adrian, she whispered, shock trembling in her voice. No, his voice was steady now, grounded, filled with a resolve he hadn't felt in months. I won't let this be the end of us. Not like this. Not when I understand what you were carrying. Not when I know what I almost lost. He reached for her, carefully at first, as if afraid she might vanish if he moved too fast. When she didn't pull away, he pulled her gently into his arms. She felt smaller than he remembered, fragile but warm, like something he had been missing without realizing it. Her forehead pressed against his chest. Adrian, you don't know how bad it might get, she murmured, her fingers clutching the fabric of his shirt. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to watch me fall apart. He tightened his arms around her, his voice rough. Then I'll help hold you together. She shook her head weakly. The treatments, the side effects, the fear, what if the doctors are right? What if it's too late? He cupped her face with both hands, lifting it so she had to meet his eyes, eyes that weren't filled with pity, but fierce devotion. It's not too late for us, he said. I don't care how hard the road is. I'm walking every step with you. Every appointment, every result, every good day, every terrifying day. Her lips trembled. You mean that? With everything I am. A soft sob escaped her, not of pain, but relief. She leaned into him, letting go of the distance she had built brick by brick. And in that small, quiet conference room, something shifted between them. Not a perfect fix, not a magical ending, but a beginning. A choice, a chance. They stepped out of the room not as a couple breaking apart, but as two souls who finally understood what it meant to fight for love.